So it is a great pleasure to invite Tim back for part two of the traditions workshop for the Drogheda Cocaine Anonymous online meeting. Tim, take it away in your own time. Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Tim. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. Thank you for having me here again. Last week I talked about the traditions in the traditional sense of how they're applied within the fellowship and within meetings and groups, and a little bit of AA's relationship or CA's relationship with the outside world. The traditions are broadly the same between different fellowships. It can be a bit different in Al-Anon. That's the one where they get very different sometimes. Anyway, what I want to talk about today, what I've been invited to talk about, is applying the traditions, the principles of the traditions in one's life. Now, some people may cry out the steps are for that. The steps are enough. The steps give me a very, very good framework as a basis for living, but they're not intended to go further than that and describe the nitty-gritty of how to get on. If the steps were entirely enough, then the traditions wouldn't be needed for groups because everybody would be behaving themselves because they're working the steps. But people who work the steps discover that as soon as they're interacting with other people, there's a little bit more to it. It's not as obvious as, well, I serve God. You can be serving God and get things very, very wrong, or at least think you're serving God and be getting things very, very wrong. So just because I'm internally at peace and I know that there's a realm of the spirit and that God loves me and God loves everyone else and I've forgiven everyone and I've made amends and all, doesn't mean that I'm going to be easy to live with or I'm going to be effective in getting things done. So the fellowship discovered that it needed principles by which people could get on within groups. Now, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. If these principles are good for helping me get on with people in my home group and helping groups get on with each other, well, why wouldn't they help in my relations with other people? With in my relations at home. There's a phrase in the big book on page 19, homes, occupations, and affairs, being the principal domains in which I demonstrate the principles of the program. It's all very well sharing a good share at your home group, but that's not going to convince newcomers that we have something which is really effective. They have to see that what we're doing here really is working in the outside world. That seems to be the thing that convinces people. And now the truth is, with addiction, the reason why I need a program at all is basically because I get so mesmerized by the thought of a drink. I have one, even though it's a really, really bad idea. And so I need to be obeying something other than myself. Now, when I came into recovery, I've been sober and clean since July 1993. When I came into recovery, I was like, yeah, of course, alcoholism, addiction, yeah, got it, fine. But what really was eating my lunch on a daily basis was everything else. The everything else is not more important, but it seems more important when you're new. And it can seem more important when you're 5, 10, 15, 20 years sober. The truth is, the thing that is important is staying away from the first drink or drug. But those other areas where the attention goes, and that's what needs to be sorted out. If only to make us good message carriers, effective message carriers. Now, they say with buses you wait a long time, then three come at once. This is the fourth traditions workshop I've given in the space of 8 days. So I'm going to try and come at the traditions in life from a different angle than I did a couple of days ago in Manchester. So I'm going to cover all the same traditions, of course, but I'm going to look at them from a different angle, particularly for the poor sods who heard me in Manchester, and I don't want to give them a rerun. There's not, you know, when you listen to your favorite speaker of XA or something, and you're like, this is great. I'm going to download everything and then like every single talk is exactly the same. I mean, everyone repeats, but you want to mix it up a little bit just occasionally, just to show people you got more than one story up your sleeve. Anyway, tradition one. This notion of unity, I think, is very interesting. I heard someone say in a meeting many years ago, his head wouldn't let his feet rest. And I thought that's a very good description of active addiction. My head wouldn't let my feet rest. Now, that's bad enough, but my head has me going in lots of different directions at once. What I learned in my step 4 was that I get pulled in all sorts of different directions. And what are the different directions? The 7 areas of self on pages 64 to 65 of the big book. Pride. What do other people think of me? Self-esteem. What do I feel about myself? Personal and sex relations, all of those relationships, security, ambitions, pocketbooks, those all work against each other. So the ambition is I want to have fun. But the bit of me that's worried about financial security gets freaked out at the bit of me that spends money to have fun. And then vice versa. The bit of me that wants financial security at all costs is going to get freaked out if I then go and spend too much money on something exciting. All of those warring elements. There's a line in the 12 and 12 where it talks about society breaking down into warring factions. Tradition 1 is there to keep the group together so it doesn't break down into warring factions. And I need to be united in order that I don't break down into warring factions within me. I need to be unified within myself. Now, the ego is a terrible thing to serve because it's schizophrenic, or it has a multiple personality disorder. It wants too many things at once, none of which make me happy, none of which work, most of which aren't attainable, and it clamors. Bill W. in Bill's story says that for a moment he had a connection with God, but then that was drowned out by the worldly clamors. Those worldly clamors within me need to be quieted. Now, you can't just give them a haircut and hope they're going to go away quietly. They can't, the ego cannot be tamed. It cannot be taught. It cannot be re-educated. You can't send it to one of those sensitivity courses. It doesn't work. It needs to be destroyed. It needs to be deactivated. Now, it can't be entirely destroyed. It seems to come back, but it can't have any vote at the board table. It can't have any say in what I do. The only way to be unified, there's a line in Language of the Heart, which is the collection of Bill W.'s essays he wrote for the Grapevine magazine over the years. And there's one of them where he said, united under God. And that echoes a line in the big book. Several passages in the big book. I need to be internally united under God, which means that I only have one person to serve. There's a chap in East London AA who said, you want to be a God pleaser, not a people pleaser, because there's only one of him. If all I ever have to do is the next right action as indicated by my higher power, that is the end of all conflict. All other voices can go away. So unity is my primary objective in tradition 1, unity under God. But it goes further, this notion of unity. I grew up in a household where umbrage was regularly taken and was used as a weapon of control and manipulation. Now, the people weren't very well, so may God forgive them. But the last thing I need in a world in which there is occasionally a little bit of conflict is to have a battleground at home. And this is where tradition 3 comes in. The first people in the world of recovery who seemed on a regular basis to be applying the traditions in their lives were the Al-Anons. So the Al-Anon literature places amazingly equal focus on the steps, the traditions, and the concepts. And there was an Al-Anon speaker, I think she was from Arkansas, who said, uh, would do these workshops about the traditions in family life and in marriage. And she said the only requirement for membership of this marriage is a desire to be in it and to make it work. Now, what that means is the unity of the marriage, the unity of the relationship is more important than personal welfare. And there's a great AA speaker, long dead, called Dr. Paul O, and his talks are well worth listening to on relationships. And he doesn't so much cite the traditions chapter and verse, but his talks about relationships really are an embodiment of the principles of the traditions. And he says, in any relationship, people think that it's give and take, that it's 50-50. He said, the thing is, when I put in my 50% and I'm looking back for the 50% that you're giving, my 50% looks to you like about 10%. It looks like I'm massively shortchanging you. To make it look to you that I'm giving 50%, I need to be giving 100%. And then if both people are doing that, you meet in the middle. So there's not in my I'm married. I'm been with some 21 years and we don't argue. So well, that's the short version. The reason we don't is because we don't want to, we don't like it. We would rather be unified than have our own way. So there's an awful lot of yielding. Now, when I yield to what I can think of sometimes unfairly as my other half's eccentricities, he considers that to be me finally seeing sense. It's amazing how two people can live in the same relationship, have the same experiences, but have very different perceptions of the same things. So neatness and tidiness and orderliness and schedules, that's me. My other half is an agent of chaos. Why we're together, how we're together, I simply don't know. So my concessions are not really concessions to have unity. It feels like I have to, as it were, give up the family silver. I have to give up my personality. No, you just have to yield on, well, quite a lot of practical things. We both yield on a lot and we somehow meet in the middle. But the last thing we want is a battleground at home. What we've learned to do, if one of us is upset, is to withdraw completely and deal with it with our own people in our own way, separately. I don't make my emotions his problem. He doesn't make his emotions my problem. And that's a really good way to maintain unity because we both recognize this is. I was going to do this in a linear way. It's not going to be linear. I'm going to go all over the place. Tradition 7, fully self-supporting through our own contributions and declining outside contributions. This means I am 100% responsible for my emotions. That means no one has ever made me feel anything. If someone does something and I feel bad, I did it to me. You didn't do it to me. You took the action. The action may be immoral, but you put 10 people in front of the same action and they'll have 10 different emotions. No emotion necessarily follows from a particular event. And that's presuming that the event is viewed accurately. And just on this viewing things accurately, I think this is such an important lesson that I've learned. Whether it fits into the traditions, I don't know, but I'm going to tell it anyway. Many years ago, I was involved in a case in my work life, which related to the accidental sinking of a Norwegian frigate in a fjord in Norway. It hit a tanker. And I was reading the witness reports, and the Norwegian police took the witness reports from the crew on board the frigate, highly trained professionals. The crew on board the tanker, highly trained professionals, the people on other vessels, coast guards, the pilots who navigate vessels up and down the fjords. When you read the narratives taken down within 24 hours of a very serious event of people who are being questioned by the police, who had no motive in lying because, by God, they get caught out. But these were professionals anyway. You sometimes wouldn't believe that the two people standing next to each other on the same bridge of the same ship had experienced the same sequence of events, but within 24 hours, the stories were so wildly divergent from each other, and each person was answering honestly. So, this is another reason why I have to do an awful lot of yielding when I'm sticking to my rights. There's a lot of talk these days of human rights, which are just things which people have agreed. Nature does not respect any rights of mine. Nature doesn't know any rights. When I'm standing up for my rights, that's my rights based on my perception of the situation. My perception is a distorted fragment of the whole. I've got to be very careful trying to enforce then this is back to tradition one, personal welfare, to try to enforce that at the cost of unity, at the cost of other people. And what this means is there are things I stand firm on for all sorts of reasons, but my basic aim at home in work situations, I have an employer and I also have my own business, but I have clients in the business. My aim is simply to do what people ask me to do in the way they asked me to do it and get on with it. And to do so cheerfully and without complaint and without being a martyr and without looking for praise and adulation. A couple of people were in a relationship, and what this is I'm not, it's not a real story, it's just one of those little apocryphal things. One person says to the other person, "Do you love me?" And the other one says, "I sleep with you, don't I?" In lots of situations in the outside world, for instance, my clients, if they pay me, that's all they're there for. I'm not looking for anything emotional from them. I don't seek anything emotional from other people. I get given what I need by God, and maybe it comes through other people, but I was horribly dependent on others for any sense of existence, validity, and worth. I was like a ravening monster, wanting other people to pay me attention constantly and to give me praise, to give me validation, to tell me how wonderful I was. I had to be the center of attention. Um, and if I wasn't the center of attention, as a friend of mine puts it, I would crack open a can of cause problem. Because if I can't be the center of attention in a good way, I can be the center of attention in a bad way. Because I was in such emotional deficit, as another friend of mine put it. She said, I was a sucking vortex of need. That is not how Tradition 7 operates. I need to be fully self-supporting through my own contributions, not trying to live off other people's contributions. And of course, as I go through life, there are times when I'm helped by others, there are times I help others. But this is what I've learned to do by trusting God, is to structure my life in such a way that if everyone I know disappeared, I'd be fine. There are other people. I'm not depending on anyone for anything. And then you can enjoy being with them because you know that if you lost them, you'd be okay. It doesn't mean they're not immensely important, and you wouldn't have a rocky period of transition if they vamoosed out of your life for whatever reason. But there's no dependence. Dependence gives rise to the need to control. And that leads me into tradition four. Um, I've got my life, which is no one's business but mine. And you've got your life, which is none of my business. And then we get to do stuff together voluntarily. And if it ain't voluntary, I don't want to do it. I don't want other people. I remember I asked a friend, actually, no, he's been demoted, an acquaintance in AA. I asked an acquaintance in AA. One must know who one's friends are. Just a little story. And I know some people have heard this. This is from a French novel. A boy goes to um, an old man to ask for some advice, and he says to the older man, um, "My best friend has abandoned me." And the older man says, "I think we need to have a little talk." Because if this friend did, and then there's a description, I won't go into it, of what the friend did. He said, "A best friend doesn't do that. He was not your friend. You are very bad at deciding who to classify as your friend. That's your problem there. No one's done anything to you. You've got very bad taste. Really, really had to learn to be very careful who I form relationships with, and the basis on which I do that. I don't jump into bed metaphorically or even literally with people very easily. But back to this. Love is doing things for fun and for free, expecting nothing in return. That's one definition. It's also defined, if you want something more medieval, as a combination of benevolence, which is wishing people well, and beneficence, which is doing good for others. But I asked a friend if he wanted to go to a meeting with me, and this is the friend I demoted. And he said, "Well, I think it would be good service for me to, accompany you to the meeting." And I'm like, you know what? Forget it. The common ground has to be for fun. If it's work for you to be with me, let's not do this. And honestly, with sponsorship, it's a very, very similar thing. If I'm not enjoying it, there's something going wrong here. I'm trying to force a solution which doesn't want to be implemented. So I've got a lot more sensitive to that. So the common ground, God's will for me is to be happy, joyous, and free. Now, sometimes I'm doing the right thing, but I'm not happy, joyous, and free because I'm being a jerk, and I'm ungrateful or fretting or worried or whatever it is. But honestly, I do think God's will for me is not to be a martyr, but to be in activities with other people where everyone is happy to be there and there is no coercion. So those are the three domains, and this is very much tradition four. It's just like AA. You have each group is autonomous. And you leave the other groups alone. Whatever they do is none of your business. You don't even want to know, and they get to leave you alone as well, which is amazing, which allows groups to be radically different. And then you come together to do things like intergroups and regions and districts and areas and service and conferences and things like that. But there's a very clear demarcation between those. And what this means is I get to leave other people alone. And because if I don't need anything from others, I no longer need to control them. So any further interest in their private affairs would simply be uh, nosiness, curiosity, or a desire to fix them, which is even worse. We've got to be careful, I think, in recovery about the helping people business. I've tried to help people who didn't want to be helped. A lot of people tried to help me in when I didn't want to be helped or I wasn't ready for the type of help they had to offer. And so I'm very light touch on this. And this is also part of the autonomy, allowing other people to come to the table and ask for what they want to. And the thing is, sometimes one bends over backwards to make it possible for others to ask for help. You'd think they'd be that ginger in phoning a dealer. I think not. I think these other people in recovery, just like me, I know exactly how to get what I wanted. I knew it when I was drinking and using. I knew it when I was new, and I know it now. So there's something going on. I can't substitute for other people's lack of desire for recovery by being super enthusiastic myself, infantilizing newcomers and pretending they don't know how to ask for help. I knew exactly how to ask for help. If I needed a drug or a drink or a something, I knew how to get it. And I only started taking action consistently when I was at the point where I recognized it was 100% in my interests to work the program, and I was no longer doing it to earn brownie points from other people or impress them or keep them off my back. And once it was sincere, it was like a hot knife through butter. So my job, I think, is to leave people be. In that period where they're deciding, you present what's available and you leave them to it. And that's very much in line with early AA principles of the rather ill-tempered first version of the big book where it says, well, if you don't agree with this, just read it again or throw it away. And they got rid of those lines. But essentially, giving other people the dignity as adults to work out what they want from recovery, if anything, and to ask for it. And you keep an eye out for, sometimes people are a little bit shy, but you keep an eye out, but not to rush around trying to fix, change, and control, not trying to rescue the fellowship, not trying to manipulate or control the whole of the local fellowship. I only have one share in any fellowship that I'm in, and that's a membership of a group. And once I've got that, that's it. That's the only stake that I've got. I'm not in charge of the group. I'm not in charge of the fellowship. Now, the flip side of this, of not rushing around. Oh, just one thing on helping people. Of course, we've got to help people. That is what tradition 12, step 12 rather, is all about. It's helping people, having woken up to the fact there is so much suffering out there within the fellowship, outside the fellowship, in the world. Having woken up to that, the job is to help people. There's a line in a book by C.S. Lewis, I may have mentioned it last week, where he describes a character. He says she's the sort of woman um, uh, who lives something like who lives to help others. And you can tell who the others are by the hunted looks on their faces. Tradition 4 says, yeah, help if you're asked, but you got to stay in your own, you got to stay in your own lane. Something on tradition 8. I know this isn't segueing neatly, but there we go. Deal with it. Tradition 8 says within AA, within CA, within Al-Anon, what I do, as I said earlier, is for fun and for free. I don't get anything back materially. There's no professional class. Now, this notion of there being no professional class in the world of recovery is a fascinating principle to apply in the outside world. Now, um, what's the joke? The nurse says to the bloke in hospital, she says, "Are you comfortable?" He says, "I make a living." Well, I make a living out there. I have an occupation, but I no longer see myself as a professional in the sense of selling myself for money. Selling oneself for money, that is a type of professional, but if you give that a minute's thought, you'll realize what type. No disrespect to the oldest profession in the world, but that's not a profession I want to practice in any form. I mean, certainly not sexual, but in any other way. The idea that my time and that I am for sale, no. So I thoroughly reject that very modern contemporary notion that one sells oneself on a market. I, I, I have an alternative here in tradition 8. What is tradition 8? I don't work for other people. I am God's servant, and God sends me to go and do things for other people. And then he pays me directly. I mean, it appears to come through these companies' bank accounts, but I know I'm being paid by God. So I don't have to look to I don't have to control my finances in that kind of managerial sense. I have to take care of my finances in terms of budgeting, forecasting, looking at how I spend money in order that I remain fully self-supporting through my own contributions. But that whole notion of selling myself, Khalil Gibran talks about this, about the relationship between work, service, and money, and he's very interesting. It's a complete rebuttal to Western civilization. And it's done so elegantly as he always does it. And now what this means is when I go into get into the office very early in the morning and I've got a ton of things to do. Some of those, according to the world, earn money, others don't. I don't care. I say to God, what do you want me to do today? And I just get on with it. And when I'm done, I go home. So I don't consider myself tied to the world of work the way certainly I used to, and the way I was brought up to think that you're in this sort of period of slavery for 45 years with a sort of trapped childhood before it and increasing imbecility afterwards. That was the picture of what one's life was going to be. No, the traditions offer me an alternative way to be. Uh, Tradition 9 is wonderful as well. And essentially, if it had a motto, it would be something like this, that I'm to be as organized as necessary, but as little as possible. And so I do need to take care. So finances is something I do need to take care of very carefully. I record things very carefully, and then it's just like with inventory. If you want to get rid of your character defects, 95% is knowing what they are, because once you know what they are in 4 and 5, and you really see the effect in 8 and 9, that will do most of the work because one's so horrified that one recoils as if from a hot flame from lots of these things. I found these things dropping away. Bob Bazance talks about this very eloquently in step 7, how when all he had to do was catalog and admit and turn his life over to God, and whole areas of his life cleared up. Um, but simplicity, to be organized as necessary, but as little as possible. Anything which is which starts out in the spirit ends up being grabbed by the material. You see, what I'll do, I'll find something that works and then want to grab hold of it and control it. You have a nice conversation with a nice person in AA, and you think, how am I going to make sure that they remain available to me because I need to secure the supply? It's very addicty. What I've needed to learn to do is to relax considerably with organization. And it drives other people crazy. So people say, when would be a convenient time to call? And I'm like, I don't know. Well, can I schedule a call? No. Well, when can I call? I know, just call. If you get through, you get through. And if you don't, you don't. And some people can't deal with it. The Al-Anons particularly have real trouble with that one. And and the weird thing is, I'll tell you one of the little psychological insights one gets from that. Sometimes I've had these calls where people try to pin me down and so they want me in the box in their schedule at a certain time. And I said, no, 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 just call any time or call during the day on one of the 7 days of the week. And they're like, oh, okay, well, like any time, yeah, any time. And then they never call. And you realize what they wanted was you to be scheduled. They didn't want the call behind that. They wanted the scheduling. And there's very interesting reasons why. But this system of not having a system, of just doing the next right thing, it's amazing how everything gets done. Because whatever I'm doing, to do it well, there are exceptions, but to do it well, I need to be in the mood for it. I need to be up for it. My head needs to be in the right space. That's why I hate. I mean, obviously, meetings like this have to be scheduled in advance. If it doesn't need to be scheduled, I'm not going to schedule it because I don't know what God's will is going to be for me in that moment. There's a bit in there's a bit in the Bible, if I dare mention that. And the Bible is not conference approved literature, so just bleep this out if you hate the Bible. But anyway, um, Jesus says to the apostles, they're like, I'm going to put this in very everyday language. They say, we're going to get arrested and interrogated and taken to court. What are we going to say? And he says, I wouldn't worry about that. When you're there, you'll know. And that's true with so many things. When I'm there, I'll know. I'll handle it. There's the curse of the alcoholic or the addict is wherever you go, there you are. You try to run away from your problems, but the it's as though the problems are saying to you, if you leave me, can I come too? Um, and whenever you move to the new country or the new situation, the new relationship, I don't know if you ever come across people talking about, yeah, I've just had this like really toxic relationship for 5 years, so I've got out of it, not realizing that it was toxic because of them. And being out of it, they're still with the toxic person, which is them. The problem is not the relationship. The problem is one's own behavior. And if it's not dealt with, you'll just recreate it wherever else you go. Now, this is all under the heading of Tradition 9. Don't plan except when you have to. Spiritual Paul, one of the things he would say many years ago is, people say I'm frightened, I don't know what's round the corner. And I know I'm going to be fine because I know what's round the corner. Me higher power's round the corner. So wherever I go, God will be there. And also, the other thing I've discovered, I rather like my own company. Um, it's not as scintillating as you might think, but it's peaceful. Um, uh, One's company, two's a crowd. In my book, I can occasionally handle a little bit of other people, but the curse of addiction has been reversed, so that wherever I go, not only will I be there, will God be there, but I will be there. And I'm happy to be wherever I am. So I know, you see, when I project forward to, let's say, a trip in a couple of months' time, oh my God, it's going to be so hard. But no, I forget I'll be there. So I'll be all right because I know how to look after myself because I've got a God. So the thing which was the curse, which is wherever you go, there you are, becomes the blessing. Wherever you go, there you are. And in that moment, if I don't know what to do, I just pray. And I'm really, really unimaginative. I've occasionally tried to learn lots of really long prayers and elaborate prayers, and they just make me feel sick. So I've got the Serenity Prayer, I've got the Lord's Prayer, got the Rosary. Um, I can sometimes remember the step 3 prayer. I can sometimes remember the step 7 prayer. If someone asks me at the end of the meeting, would you please help us lead us out with the step 3 prayer? I completely freeze and I forget it and everyone thinks I'm a fraud. I know the general idea, but I'm terrible at memorizing prayers. But I tell you, just saying the Hail Mary over and over and over, I could be singing Suzanne Vega lyrics over and over and over. I think it would have the same effect. Because what's marvelous about prayer is it takes me out of the equation. And this is tradition 12, anonymity, become no one. There's a wonderful line in the big book where the lawyer, who is the third alcoholic anonymous, um, uh, he says to Bill and Bob, you're somebody. I used to be somebody. Now I'm no one. And they laugh. And they laugh because I think he's got it backwards. His problem is that he's still someone. And their solution is that they've become no one. In other words, there's still the external life which has to be operated. but that's not who I am anymore. That's just stuff that I happen to be doing during the day. Behind that, there's a quiet universe which goes on forever, in which I'm anonymous, in which there's none of that external stuff is my identity. And real safety lies in that anonymity. If you're totally anonymous, and I don't mean in the practical sense of people knowing you're in recovery. I mean in the sense of just losing any connection with this notion of identity. If there's nothing there, there's nothing to hit, and you're completely safe. I've just hit 40 minutes, Keith, so I'm going to stop there, and hopefully there'll be a question or two.
Thank you, Tim. Very insightful. Thanks so much. Guys, we are going to, I'll just stop the timer, open the room up for the Q&A section. So please use the raise hand feature or the chat function if you have a question. I'll kick us off with a question if that's all right, Tim. Um, you mentioned something about the destruction of ego, and I think Chuck Chamberlain was a very big advocate of the destruction of ego. In your experience, which have you found more effective as regards the steps or the traditions um, in helping that destruction of ego?
I think honestly, the most useful thing in terms of having the ego destroyed is seeing one's appalling effect on other people, paying attention, looking at the looks on their faces when you have a go at them, becoming sensitive to how other people experience one. And I think domestically, that's where one really sees it. My other half and I get on very well. We really very well. But I've made some mistakes over the years, and seeing the effect of those mistakes, that's enough to chasten you. I think there is not. It's not any specific questions. It's any specific steps, any specific traditions. It's becoming sensitive to the people around, and you realize you don't want to be the person you've been. I think that's the simplest way of putting it. Ray.
Hello, I'm Ray. I'm an addict alcoholic. Thank you, Tim. I loved that. I got loads out of it. With you and your partner, I just wondered, did you used to argue and did you learn a new way of being? Did you have to work through that, or did you start off with this way of not arguing?
Honestly, I see. I was 11 years. I think 11. Yeah, 11 years sober when we met. So a lot of stuff had been worked out already, but I I had never I was an arguer in some relationships when I was drinking, but I was more of a whiner and a manipulator, which is a slightly different thing. One of the interesting things about arguing and being mean to people. I'm going to talk about this, but I know it sort of goes outside the traditions, but it's all recovery related. It feels in the moment when one's being mean to someone that one is, or having a go at them or whatever, it feels like one has lost control. But I heard someone say a while ago, you haven't lost control, you've surrendered control. And there's a big difference. And it talks on page 66 about resentment and saying to the extent that we permit these, in other words, resentment is not something that happens to me, it's something that presents itself and I permit it, I let it in. And I think with uh, that sort of aggression, really, with other people, uh, I used to draw the attention of the police when I was drinking and using. I won't go into details. Um, but what's interesting is I could be very, very badly behaved, and a policeman would intervene And I knew how to can it. I knew how to turn squeaky clean very quickly to avoid arrest or being charged or prosecution or whatever. I found ways to I could turn on the charm and talk my way out of it. And I've noticed the ability to can one's emotions and behave oneself. One can do it with the police, one can do it with the judge, one can do it w with a dealer that one needs to stay on good terms with, whatever they're dealing. There are times when I recognize which side of my bread is buttered, and it turns out I am able to control my behavior. So if I can keep the aggression within in any setting, that means when I'm letting it out, it's because there's some level I'm giving myself permission. And someone said to me about my aggressiveness. They said if your character defect was shoplifting or being cruel to animals, you wouldn't let yourself do that more than once. You deal with that very, very quickly. So you're not dealing with this. It's because you're not willing, because you haven't seen the horror of the horror of what you're doing. There's a question about in the chat, which is very interesting about scheduling calls. Why would people have other motives? I don't know about other people, but a lot of my, dare I say, codependency. I don't really like the word, but if I say it, you'll know sort of instinctively what I mean. The dependency on other people to mend my wounded self-esteem. I heard that put very, very well. A lot of the mechanism of trying to mend my wounded self-esteem before I actually had some self-esteem was by seeking others to demonstrate their desire in some way. So when I got people to schedule me in, I felt thrilled. I felt important. I remember getting appointments with psychiatrists and thinking, look how important I am. I'm in the schedule of this top psychiatrist. I didn't particularly want the session, but I liked the appointment. I liked the fact that I had power over their schedule. I had found my way into their life. There's a lot going on behind those things. A lot of my real motivations is there isn't much in the literature about motivations, but there is something in there. In Al-Anon is very, very helpful for this, about looking at what your true motivations are, not accepting what is going on the surface. Um, that's that. No more questions in the chat. Do you have any more up your sleeve, Keith, while we're waiting to see what other people might bring up? Oh,
See,
Jackson.
How you doing, Tim? Jackson Luminatic. Keith, thank you for your service. Yeah, Tim, I just have a question for you in terms of your opinion on WhatsApp groups when it comes to the meetings and the likes of service groups as well, and managing egos, because you get a lot of keyboard warriors, but when it comes to meeting them face to face, they wouldn't say what they've said in the groups. And how would you go about managing those egos within the group?
Okay, perfect. That's such a good question. Okay, so the whole sort of shit show, if I dare use that word, of WhatsApp groups is not new, because before that there was the all the Facebook stuff. Groups would have Facebook things going on, and there were other things earlier as well. So I've got a view which is not terribly popular, but there we go. I'm going to say what it is. Um, so if a group has business to transact, that business should be transacted in a business meeting or a group conscience meeting, which is scheduled at a particular time, at a particular place, and the people who can be asked show up. The people who care enough to carve out the time from their schedule, haul their behinds to the room, and you arrange to go for dinner afterwards. So you can't be nasty to people because you'll have to sit opposite them for an hour while you're eating your curry. This is one of the great benefits in going for dinner after a meeting. It forces people to behave well during the meeting and at the business meeting and the group conscience. If you're allowed to flounce off into the night, all hell will break loose in the business meeting and the group conscience meeting. The awareness that the business meeting and the group conscience meeting is within the setting of a greater unity, sandwiched by the meeting itself on one before the business meeting, and then the fellowship meeting afterwards, sandwiched between the two, creates a safe space. A good business meeting lasts somewhere between 20 minutes and 40 minutes, maybe less. I used to be the chair of a lot of experience in service. I used to be the chair of North East London Intergroup, and we got the business meetings of North East London Intergroup down from about 2 hours a session to 33 minutes was my record. You want these meetings to be short. You want to transact the business and then go home again. If you try to conduct group business in a WhatsApp group, your business meeting lasts 24 hours a day. And whenever the little WhatsApp thing goes bleep, you realize you're still in a business meeting and it never ends. A business meeting which is in permanent session is not started with a serenity prayer and ended with a serenity prayer. There's no prayer at all, so there's no God. I would never, ever transact business of a group in a WhatsApp group, ever, under any circumstances. There's one small exception. Sometimes a group will have a steering committee of 3 or 4 people who can handle urgent things which arise between the business meetings. So situations which impose themselves and require a quick response. For instance, the church where the meeting is being held has got a problem and you need to respond very quickly. And those will typically have 4 or 5 people who get on well with each other, where you're friends, and there's it's the senior people, as it were, the people with the most experience and the most time, who are working very, very well together. And then you can do small administrative tasks on a WhatsApp group. But anything with any substance, forget it. And if there's any sense of it becoming heated, it should be the privilege of anyone to say, I don't think this can be resolved here. Let's park it till the next business meeting. And that's the end of it. Not another word on the topic until the business meeting. I do use WhatsApp groups. I can think of a couple of situations where they've worked well. One of them, my home group on a Saturday, has a WhatsApp group for so-called alternates. So those are people who are available to stand in for when other people can't do service. And the only communications permitted on that group are the coordinators saying, tea maker this Saturday. And then someone swipes it and says, I can do that. And anything else is deleted. No pictures of teddy bears, no links to COVID conspiracy websites, just none of that crap. Nothing about the Illuminati, nothing about other groups, nothing about, those conspiracy things about the General Service Board and rising up again. None of that. Nothing is allowed on there. And no chit chat. No, how's your week, everyone? Don't even do it. There's a phrase in economics that bad money drives out good, and crazy people drive the good people out of those free-for-all WhatsApp groups, and they just descend into chaos. I've never seen one work, except when they're very, except for very, whether there's a very small number of people, is one situation where it can sometimes work, and uh, where it's very closely controlled, then it can work. But as far as contentious issues, uh, and alcoholics and addicts can make pretty much anything contentious. So almost everything falls into this category. It must be dealt with in the business meeting and the group conscience meeting. Now, with business meetings and group conscience meetings, you can't control the egos, but what you can do is you can have proceed, because that's the problem, that's trying to deal with the problem at the wrong level. You don't have access to their ego and they can't control their ego. So you certainly can't control it. What you can do is regulate the behavior at public level. How do you do that? Business meetings and my home group, you're not allowed to raise a topic unless it's been raised in writing in advance. And I remember this is a trick for intergroup meetings, area meetings, district meetings. If a topic like arises during the meeting and no one's had time to think about it, no one's had time to read the literature or pray or research or anything, they're just blah, 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 blah. You look, and often it descends into two camps. Like, let's say, a meeting has had a treasurer run away with £1 billion because they haven't paid the rent for a long time. And then the question is, do we call the police? Does intergroup call the police or do we tell all the other groups in the area that there's this crazy treasurer person who's going around trying to become the treasurer of meetings to steal the funds? And that's the sort of thing which will come up at an intergroup meeting or an area meeting. And it all blows up. I'll tell you what the trick is. Usually, there's a very loud voice on one side of the argument and a very loud voice on the other side of the argument. And what you do, say, Bobby, Larry, how about would you two like to form a little subcommittee to spend the next month investigating what the options are and how those options stack up with the principles of the traditions and the concepts? Write a little document, send it to the secretary 1 week before the next district meeting. We'll have it circulated. Then we can have an informed group conscience on the back of your hard work. You'll never see either of them at intergroup ever again. You can't control the egos, but you can regulate the behavior by redirecting back to what the business of the intergroup is. So there are some answers there. There are some WhatsApp groups where which I've seen work, where a reading gets posted every day and then people are allowed to come back to share on the reading, but those work only if the postings on the WhatsApp groups are very closely controlled, so other crap isn't allowed to come in there, no spamming with meeting details and things like that, and no back and forth discussions, just like in a meeting, you share and then you shut up. And that's the end of it. So that's the answer to that. Gemma.
Thank you very much, Tim. Gemma, addict alcoholic. I'm going right back to what you were talking about when somebody new in offering you help. I've been really guilty of suffocating newcomers, and keeping an eye and being all motherly, and it's I've learned the hard way, because if they want it, they want it. But what about when it says about the newcomer, the approach references in the book? There's a lot of emphasis by some groups where we make that approach for sponsorship and that type of thing. I'm just wondering that it feels like there's a bit of a fine line there, and not many, perhaps not everybody will have the nous to understand if they're crossing that line. Is that making any sense?
Yeah, it does. You're right. I mean, the thing that makes the program difficult is the fact that you're balancing opposing principles at the same time. It's not just, to the man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The man who only has a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you have only tradition five, primary purpose, carrying the message, and you have no other traditions, then, well, you don't have to do any thinking, but you'll get a lot of things wrong. I think the best, and this is a trick. Sometimes people try and take each other through the traditions or the concepts, and I've always found that the tedious process. What's much more interesting and useful, get an actual situation and you take yourself through it by you say, let's look at this situation through the lens of tradition one. Let's look at it through the lens of tradition two and go through the traditions like that. Exactly the same with the concepts. That's the only way it gets learned. It can't be taught. You can share some experiences, but like one-to-one teaching on the traditions, I don't know how to get that to work. Uh, I mean, I've benefited from listening to people doing what I'm doing today and saying, well, this is how they have applied the traditions. That's where I've learned everything. But I think the answer to your question, I think in great part lies in tradition 11, attraction, not promotion. And so to be findable within the fellowship one is in. So uh, of course, observe anonymity outside recovery, but I don't observe anonymity within my own anonymity within the recovery world. So people could, I want people who need to find me for whatever reason to be able to find me. Um, I don't need to be coy about that because we need to be. That this is what they say in AA. They say we're Alcoholics Anonymous, not Alcoholics Invisible. There needs to be a visibility. So in my home group, I think they do it. I think they do it very well. They say at the end, would anyone who is available for sponsorship put their hands up? And sometimes 20 hands go up, 30 hands go up. It's very good. Now, the the other thing is, this is where the genius lies in having fellowship that you go to after the meeting. Because all of the stuff that falls through the cracks during the meeting gets dealt with at fellowship afterwards. And hopefully, there are enough people who've got their heads screwed on at fellowship to know how to handle the new person. You can't deal with it. There's too much going on in the meeting. You need to be sitting down and eating together. There's an equalization that takes place when you're all eating from the same communal naan bread. It puts you on a level with people. Um, it's amazing how that works. And I've seen lots of situations where pretty complicated cases come along to fellowship, but by the time they leave, they've got a sponsor. And with some people, you'll be very, very gently catchy monkey. Sometimes you going a bit too hard and monkey run away. Monkey leave fellowship halfway through fellowship. We had one of those recently. But the truth is, in that case, they were spoiling for a fight, and they looked for one and they got one, and um, the newcomers are not idiots. I think they have got nous. Often you'll hear a lot more common sense from newcomers sharing because they haven't been indoctrinated with all sorts of ideas which are alien to them, which they're then regurgitating. They just say things as they've worked them out themselves. I think it works pretty well by not trying to overthink it or over control it. You make yourself available, and you just have to. I think with newcomers, you've got the whole gamut from leaving them be, letting them come to you, and going all the way out. There was a situation many years ago. I was in a meeting on a Sunday evening, and Nearby where I live in London, there's a very large ultra-Orthodox Jewish community. Lots of the community are Hebrew and Yiddish speakers. That a lot of people speak very little English or no English at all. And a bloke from the Hasidic community came in, big book meeting, left halfway through, and um, uh, I wouldn't do this normally, but I ran out after him and spoke to him. And as it happens, I know a few words of Hebrew, so we started a conversation, and he got very heavily into recovery after that. We made that connection. It was the right thing to do. I do not run after people out of meetings. If they leave, it's their choice. But there I could see there was he was having a genuine difficulty. And it was the right thing to do. God will tell you what to do. You don't need to. This is tradition. You don't need the rule. You don't need the rule. You need the principles. But then what overrides the principles is in the moment, God will tell you what to do, and it will be the opposite of everything you've ever learned, but it's the right thing. And you'll know afterwards and you can't replicate it. You can't write it down. So, well, I shall do that every time. Now, there's a question here. How do you tactfully suggest Al-Anon or Co-Anon to a loved one or family member without it making it seem you are suggesting they need it? There's a lot in that question, isn't there? A lot going on in there. I've taken a lot of people to their first Al-Anon meeting, and Al-Anon's a very strange thing. You go to a CA meeting, it's really clear what it's about and why people are there and how it works. And you read something which literally says how it works. And then people are very clear in CA, very program focused, step focused, process focused. Get a sponsor, do the steps. This is how you do it, and it's really very organized and very good. Al-Anon. I've been an Al-Anon for 30 years. I still don't know how it works really. It's a very strange organization. I've taken a lot of people to their first meeting. Every single one has been utterly baffled. And some go back and some don't. And a friend of mine says, with Al-Anon, don't go until you're really ready. Um, try to hold out for as long as you can. Because unless you are 100% behind it, it won't make any sense. It'll just seem like lots of people complaining about things. But when you, as I do, as I did, when you get to a stage when you are just burnt out, dry as a crisp, with 1,000 alcoholics and addicts in your life, and you're kind of getting things as right as you can, but you're reacting. You see a phone call coming in, your blood starts to run backwards, and you're like, what's going on here? I was at an AA intergroup meeting many years ago where the treasurer had some kind of jip with one of the other officers, and they were going at it hammer and tongs in the meeting. And I realized in the middle of this intergroup meeting, this was maybe 20 years ago, I realized I'd stopped breathing. I was holding my breath because two alcoholics were arguing in my presence. When you start to notice things like that, an Al-Anon meeting is a breath of fresh air. Now, I say that by way of background, because the question is, how do you suggest it to someone? If you think alcoholics are strong-willed and cloth-eared, and addicts are strong-willed and cloth-eared. Us Al-Anons, we got a lot more go in us before we give up. I don't suggest Al-Anon. I wait for people to say, I'm really effed. Do you have any idea what to do? If it's you can't pick unripe fruit. It won't work. It just makes you the annoying person that they can't then go to when they do actually rock bottom. One of the things about Al-Anon as well is you get to Al-Anon and it takes sometimes 5 to 10 years before people really start to thaw out and realize the problem is them. It took me a long time to realize the problem was not the alcoholics in my life, it was my reaction to them. And I spent a long time trying to do like boundary setting. And it was all an exercise in control. I had to get Al-Anon wrong for a very, very long time before I started to get it right, which means that this whole idea of like, I'm going to suggest Al-Anon to a family member who is nuts and has been nuts for 40 years, and that they're going to go, oh, amazing. And then they go to Al-Anon and it will all reveal itself. It's not going to happen. You can't hold your breath for other people to get well. You look at how hard it is for people that really want to get well in recovery. It's hard for them. So unless there's the absolute willingness there. Now there's another good question. If a person, oh, I'll do this very quickly, Keith. If a person is court ordered to attend AA, is that in any way in conflict with Tradition 3 if that person does not want to be there? Whether other organizations mandate people to go to a 12-step fellowship, I don't think is my business or my group's business. That's a matter of public policy on which we have no opinion. And that solves a lot of that question. The person is then given a choice to go or not go and accept the consequences either way. My job is not to police any of that. If they come and they want to talk to me, I'll talk back to them. And if they don't want to talk to me, I won't talk to them. They get to choose. They're responsible for how they show up to the relationship with me and the other people in the group. I'm responsible for responding well to that. But you see, this is Tradition 10. You apply Tradition 10, it'll free up your whole day. There are so many things you won't have to have an opinion on. It's really amazing. And I think we're at 8:45, so that'll be the end of it, Keith.
Tim, thank you so much for that insight and everyone for the questions. Tim, I hope you don't mind me saying that you've been invited and accepted the invitation to speak at the CA convention in Galway this month from the 19th to the 24th. So I really appreciate your service. So we'll wrap it up there.